Welcome back, all my 40k fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation to bring you my army list. They'll be taking on Lane tonight. I will be bringing Grey Knights because just recently with the new data slates, there was a lot of really cool weapon changes. And Librarian went up in points too, sadly. Kind of saw that one coming. But the Dread Knights, their weapons, their characteristics, just mild little changes could make a huge impact. Psycannons now having ignore cover and an additional AP for their heavy psycannons. And the hammer and sword both going up +1 weapon skill. That is huge implications for this army that has struggled to do damage in a lot of different areas. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do. Turn on the bell for notifications, get notified on all the content we bring here on the channel, including the game that we'll be taking on later tonight. Now, for right now, I am working a lot on the Necron, the character Obscenus Phalanx. Sorry, I'm butchering that word still. But I've been working on that detachment. Before I jump over into a bunch of Necrons and do a whole bunch of Necron stuff, I really want to try out some of this cool stuff with Grey Knights and see how this damage went up. I'm channeling my inner Lane with this list because I got more and more and more power going into this thing. So with that, let's jump over to the list and talk about what I'm going to be bringing today. All right, here it is. Far reach from the MSU style of my previous list that I've been running the majority of this edition as far as Grey Knights are concerned. Instead, we are bringing 5 Dread Knight chassis in this list. Let's jump in and talk about what we got going on. So first, let's start with the characters. I have 5 characters in this list, so this puts me at a risk of someone taking fixed objectives for Assassinate and Bring It Down. Although Bring It Down, I think, would max out at 15 points. Killing all of my characters could give 20 points for Assassination. However, that means you basically have to come close to tabling me, as the only things that are not characters would be the 3 Nemesis Dread Knights. Every other unit would have a character in it, so pretty much got to wipe them out too. So, characters. Of our 5, we have Castellan Crow. Crow is, well, Crow. He leads a squad of purifiers, gives them +1 to their purifying ritual, and is just all around a pretty decent beatstick. He's been in a couple lists, leading my purifiers throughout most of this 10th edition, and that's what he will continue to do here. Next up, we have our Libby. This is a solo librarian. He will not be joining the Terminator squad today. Sorry, buddy. And he doesn't have any enhancements or relics on him for this game. He is just going to be a librarian to do some mortal wounds and bounce around the map, and also help me hold up objectives and score additional points. A lot of him came down to the fact that when I built this list, I had a weird point sink of like 115 points left. And I was like, well, this guy, he still can do some damage. He can still do some work. So he's back again, and we'll see how he does with this list that has quite a bit more damage output to it. Next up is going to be my Grand Master. So I ran back and forth with Grandmaster and Drago, and after I talk about the army, I'll go back and forth on the debate that I had with this guy. But this is what I settled with. So I took a Grandmaster, and he will have the enhancement First to the Fray. So he will be able to him and his unit, the 10-man squad of Terminators, will be able to deep strike on turn 1. This means it can also rapid ingress on turn 1, since rapid ingress says a unit cannot deep strike on a turn that it would not normally be allowed. Since this unit is allowed to deep strike on turn 1, I could technically rapid ingress with them as well. After the last tournament, having First to the Fray seems more and more valuable, especially in matchups where I'm forced to go first, so I can get some wider board space and wider coverage when I'm not able to pick up units and start deep striking around. And last of the characters is my 2 Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knights. I have been a big fan of the regular Dread Knight. Being able to advance and shoot and still charge is huge for a lot of distance, especially when you combine it with a hammer that can tank shock for a lot of damage. I will still be bringing that same Dread Knight with that same cannon and same hammer, but he is going to be upgraded now, and he will be a Grand Master. So the Grand Master can get targeted with a battle tactic strat and reduce it to 1 command point once per battle round. He can also, once per battle round, 1 model with this ability can get full rerolls to hit, to wound, and damage results when fighting a monster or vehicle. So only one of these is going to be able to do it per turn, as far as what I can read, and I'm going to double check over how that all works. But needless to say, that's still a strong reroll for combat off of this Dread Knight. And I will be bringing 2 of the Grandmasters. This one comes with a hammer, psycannon, silencer. On top of it, he will also have the inescapable wrath. So when he goes to charge, he gets +1 on his charge. So a deep strike, I can get an 8-inch charge. Still a long bomb charge, but it +1 can help and could be critical in some situations. And of the other Grandmaster Dread Knights, we have this guy. He is one of my converted Dread Knights to have a little more of an epic pose, and he also comes with a sword. The sword changed over and actually has some viability now. Where the first Dread Knight with a hammer is King of Tank Shock, this one actually can use that 2 CP strat for devastating wounds. Being that he's a Grandmaster and can reduce it down to 1 command point, this means that he will be able to get the devastating wounds on 10 attacks with a sword that hits on 2s. On top of the fact that if he's fighting a vehicle monster in that, he can still reroll the damage result and is hitting on 2s, rerolling the hits, wounds, and damage result. So there's a little bit stronger play to taking a sword now, where it seemed like hammer was the only way to go because of the big tank shock. Now 2s to hit, that's not too bad with the hammer, and we're going to see if that can do some work today. He's also coming with psycannon and silencer, and he will have the sigil of exigence. Because I gave him the sword, I would like him to be able to fight in the infantry portion of the game when there's more infantry on the field than vehicles, hopefully. So that's where that sword is really going to shine, and that's why I want to be able to jump away when he gets shot at, so he can last out until that portion of the game. Since we're talking about Dread Knights, let's continue on and talk about the 3 standard Nemesis Dread Knights I'll be bringing. So the 2 that are standing that have the cool little debris that my buddy built for me on my bases and have the battle cannons for their psycannons, well, they will be psycannon and silencer Dread Knights. Dread Knights can advance and shoot and charge, so these guys are able to be pretty quick. And yeah, all the deep strike shenanigans with that Grey Knights bring to the table. The other guy that is striding, he will also have a battle cannon, or not battle cannon, a psycannon. See, I'm messing myself up. A psycannon as well. And he's going to be he's going to have a silencer as well. I was considering an incinerator on this guy to try it out, and I'm back and forth. And actually, in the future, I may give it a try. Having 2d6 on a 1 command point Overwatch seems pretty good. But with a lot of other stuff in this list, I feel like I'm going to need command points for other things, and I'm not going to use it as much. Having the range on the silencer so I don't have to dedicate super far, and also maybe not pick the guy off of the table and still be able to shoot, seems more valuable. Now, all 3 of these will be equipped with hammers, even though only 1 is modeled with it. I'm currently in the hunt for, and let me know if anyone knows of a good source. I'm looking for a hammer that I have the chains, I need the hammer. And I want to make a hammer that I can shoulder sling to my Dread Knights. That's the aesthetic I want to go with. But I'm having trouble finding a hammer that isn't, well, the Nemesis Dread Knight hammer and then chopping it into a million pieces to try to glue it back together in a hammer not being held by a hand. So let me know in the comment section if you know anywhere I could find some decent hammers to put on a Dread Knight to shoulder sling it. Over into the infantry. Like I said, I have 10 purifiers. I like these guys a lot. They do a lot of damage. They're very, very, very efficient at picking up infantry. And all around, they make great utility out of many of the strats that I do have to offer. Being led by Castle and Crow really buffs their ability and their damage output. And as they get weaker, they get stronger. Hulk Smash out of the purifiers. They will still have their 4 incinerators that I've been bringing this edition. And yeah, Rested Bolters. And again, because our Nemesis weapons are all coupled in 1 weapon, I get to put all my hammers in here and make it look pretty. Last but surely not least is a 10-man squad of Terminators. This was tricky, and I was back and forth on Terminators or Paladins. Again, I'll talk about that afterwards because it's the same debacle with Drago and the Grandmaster. In the end, I went with the Terminators. What these guys bring to the table. They will bring lethal hits. They will bring a apothecary. They bring 3 OC value because of the banner. 2 psycannons in the squad. The Grandmaster, who's going to be leading them, also has a psycannon, and since he's leading them, the squad will also ignore any and all modifiers to characteristics. This, with GW's recent FAQ, seems very, very valuable, especially back behind the lethal hits, with Hypercrypt doing very well, with C'tans being very popular. This is a way to get around things that can reduce damage since they ignore the modifier because the C'tan modifier modifies the damage characteristic of the attack. Their swords, their weapons in combat where the C'tan's going to want to be, are able to do their 2 damage still all the way through. So that's what I'm bringing today. Yes, I am hyper focused on that heavy psycannon. That heavy psycannon to me is huge, so big right now. We can ignore cover. So Marines that have a 3-up save, you're staying at that 3-up. You're not going to get cover and ignore our AP1 now. On top of the fact that we also get that 2 AP buff. So if you go ahead and armor or contempt your 3-up unit, you're still going to get hit with that AP1 and still going to be on a 4-up save. That to me is just value, and is going to make the psycannon actually able to do damage. Now, will we still struggle with high toughness, high wound count things? Probably. But that's where a lot of the combat aspect of the army comes in, because things that we hit in combat, we hit in combat. The strength 6 is kind of an iffy point for the close combat weapons on like the purifiers and the terminators, but it's still 2 damage, and with things like the lethal hits, we can push it through. Now, one of the big debacles I had going into this was between the Paladins and the Terminators, as well as the what's called the Grandmaster and Drago. So this was kind of a tough little point that I was at. So Drago, especially with this heavy power list, Drago gives me +3 to the charge when they come out of teleport or deep strike. That's big. That's really big. This is a unit that can almost do turn 1 charges from if we go second on the table. This is a unit that can charge the turn they land in all aspects of it. You do have a command point for a reroll, and you're looking at +3 on the charge. When you need a 9, boom, you need a 6 now. And a CP reroll, that's a makeable charge. So whatever Drago is bringing in with him, we want it to be strong. So I looked at the Paladins. Paladins they hit on 2s. They basically have the new version of transhuman, where it's if your weapon is higher than their toughness, then it's -1 to wound. But if you do get to that point for these guys specifically of strength 10 because they're T5 and you double it, now you're going to be getting 3s. You still get the -1, but now it's going to be 3. So it's like that's the new version of it. And that's what Paladins get. The saves are the same. The toughness is the same. The attacks are the same. The damage output in combat is the same. The only difference is the fact that they reduce the damage. They reduce the wound roll versus those specific attacks. They do not get an apothecary, and they're OC1, so they go to OC2 with the banner. Again, 4 special weapons, so 4 psycannons could go in there. Now, if I take Drago, I can't take another character. There's no other character to join, so we're not getting a first to the fray aspect out of the squad, which means it's coming in turn 2, so it's delayed. We're going to be slowing the army down in some aspects. If I took Drago with the Terminators, now when that unit hits, there's a couple things. 1, they come with lethal hits, cool. 2, that is a 3 OC unit. That unit, without Drago, is 30 OC by itself. That can just rush and take home field objective like that. No problems there. But again, they will take the modifiers to C'tans, and they can't drop in turn 1. So then I looked over at the Grandmaster. Grandmaster being able to ignore those modifiers, which right now with the current state of the meta and C'tans being popular in Necron builds, one of the things that I'm looking at to get around and compete with it is being able to have certain things that ignore that modifier. The Grandmaster gives the ignore modifier, also giving first to the fray. So then it came down to, that was my thing of like, okay, Grandmaster right now I think will be the better play with the current meta. Because while, yes, I'm bringing huge power, I'm taking this kind of seriously. I'm taking this seriously as like, could there be something here? Dread Knights just got a buff. Let's spam them. I got 5 on the table now. So with the Terminators, the Paladins, I should say, they have the psycannon. They'd ignore extra psycannon or incinerator, which I would probably go for psycannon because of how many you can have. But now they're going to get reduced by the Catans for their damage aspect. They hit on 2s, but they don't get any more attacks. Again, when we go over to the Terminators, however, now the Terminators hit on 3s, same number of attacks, but again, OC3, and they come with lethal hits. So this is a chance to bypass having to roll to wound and being able to have the lethal hits that go right through. You're hitting on 3s, 6s, cool. Those are automatically wounding, and now we don't have to deal with the 5s or maybe even 6s going into 12 strength 12 unit or toughness 12 units. So there was a lot of thought in that initially. I'm not saying that I'm making the right choice, but that's how I kind of came down to it. Is Drago is cool. That ability is awesome. That is so cool to be able to charge out of that, but it delays me one more turn where the Grandmaster can ignore the modifiers and bring this squad in on turn 1 out of Deep Strike. Moving over to Terminators Paladins. Paladins are a little tougher, but they don't have an apothecary. Terminators got an apothecary, a little less guns, but lethal hits, so they're kind of a little more deadly. So that's what we got today. Haven't decided the mission yet. Lane and I are going to discuss that, and I'm looking forward to it. We got Dread Knights back on the table, baby. Dread Knight spam, I believe, is served. Yeah, I'd say that's about right. End of 9th edition. That's where Grey Knights were kind of at, one of the Sword Brethren lists. Run a bunch of Dread Knights, run Attack Marine, and just have a stratagem to pummel a unit to oblivion. The only thing I didn't like about 9th edition Grey Knights, Dread Knights, all of it, is that you had still that psychic test. And if you failed your psychic test, there wasn't a lot to push that automatic cast through, which made it sometimes where you made your play and your psychic test failed, or someone spent a command point 4-up, ignored your power. It was rough beats. It was rough. It was rough as a psychic army. Now, we don't have to worry about that. So here we go, guys. All right, see you over at the Bottle Report. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.